Alright, so we're just gonna roll down some notes here about the Zeitgeist 3 movie. These will just be notes and I'll collate them later. Okay, so far it is a blunt, obvious propaganda piece that is got no subtlety whatsoever to anyone who's thinking about it critically. I mean, I'm at 8 minutes and 15 cents. And the fact is that you've got this old guy who's obviously reading a bit of propaganda where he's saying, oh yeah, all of these bad things happened, and yes, these inferences sound like they may be true, but nevertheless, these things are unproven. And furthermore, you're not setting us up for anything where you're going, when your conclusion comes, you're not setting us up for because of this, this is why I'm concluding this. You're not saying that up. It sounds like a big setup for a logical fallacy so far. So we shall see. All right, 20 minutes, 48 seconds. This is a beaut. I don't even know where to start on this, but actually, okay, just straight out of it, the worst one of the bunch is he's talking about. He says no substance or drug is in and of itself addictive. Okay, I can see that for some substances, but not for all substances. For example, heroin is uh, in and by itself addictive, but only if you're human. So I suppose it's not for all classes, but for let's face it, what we're talking about here is human behavior and how humans interact with humans and the world. So to say that heroin might not be addictive to algae has no bearing on it. The fact of the matter is that heroin works on a cellular level, and the addictions can be shown and studied on a cellular level. And that is the way that these other addictions work too. The fact that the mind has the ability to train or overcome addictions has nothing to do with the fact that the actual change occurs on the cellular level and that it causes pain and addiction on the upper level to an organism to the whole. It's like, what are we going to call? You want to try to change around and define what addiction is too? Uh, because that isn't a productive area of discussion, I believe, unless you can show me otherwise. I mean, really, what we have here is a guy who's sitting there acting all authoritative on the matter, but he's obviously never had to deal with addiction himself. He speaks from ignorance and possibly in trying to be empirical about it and in the ivory tower sort of way, this is why he makes this mistake. Okay, 4704. Wow, what a leap there. After talking about all these people and their leaps, he goes and does something even worse. He finds a way to, he's talking about theories and some opinions and some really harsh summarizations of John Locke and Adam Smith. Not like these guys were infallible, but he puts a lot of words in their mouth by way of trying to argue that, well, because the effects and the interpretation that some people had of the system was this way, therefore the original men themselves posited and supported these views, which is utter hogwash. But on top of that, then he goes to say that the current genocides that are occurring worldwide, he doesn't name them, but maybe in Africa, maybe perpetrated by the United States or in the Balkans, who cares? Whatever, the genocides, he says, are direct causes of the thought processes of Adam Smith. Wow. Wow, what a leap. Idiot. Okay, 5640. He says, it is literally impossible for any company to make the best of anything and still keep a competitive edge. Bullshit. All you have to do is monetize the total cost of owning a product over time. And this has been known since Adam Smith, for example, just to put that out there, he puts it right there itself. That is how a society should criteriarize what is the best thing to buy. If you have one bicycle that's $100 and one that's $110, it isn't which one is immediately the most cheapest, it's one the cheapest over time. And if replacing the handlebars on the cheaper bicycle will cost you $20 for the total cost of the bicycle being $120, obviously the cheaper bike over the long run is the more expensive bike. But the key to a free market system is that it lets the consumer decide. For example, maybe you really take care of your stuff and you want to make that sacrifice of really making the paying attention and doing all of the maintenance and labors and everything on it, and so you think that the cheaper one will last okay if you go through this extra effort. Or maybe you're the kind who doesn't want to worry about that. You just want the absolute best thing. You can make that decision, and it will be cheaper for you depending on your labor and your decisions. The fact that the American average consumer doesn't know how to quantify, qualify, or even to think about economic decisions doesn't mean that the free market system is invalid or that there's no reasoning or validity to these arguments. And it doesn't mean that the system immediately breaks down because most people are buying crap from China or IKEA that breaks, instead of buying quality things that are 3 or 4 times more expensive in the short run, but over the long run they last better. And if you want argument in favor of what I just said, all you have to do is think about how much folks value the heirlooms and so on from the good old days that their parents have, that last and go through generations and generations, those products that were built to last. So obviously they crave and value these products, they just haven't been taught how to identify them in a real qualitative and quantitative monetary sense. Okay, 1 hour 6 minutes. Why is it that every single time they bring up economists or economist theory, they feel the need to dramatize and then immediately afterwards mock, and then it's like their formula. Then afterwards, what they do is they put words that were never said by those people into their mouth, maybe in a summary that's kind of close, but most of the time not even anywhere near the close. Like they're talking about Milton Friedman and Mises and these other economists, and then they immediately, in the exact same sentence, in the exact same breath, with hardly even a comma, they put in deficit spending and all of these things, that these are aspects of the government and have nothing to do with free economic theory. It's really a larceny that they're perpetrating on people that don't actually know these people or these concepts. They are attributing that A and B are related when they really are intrinsically opposite of each other, that they have nothing to do with each other. And it is, in its essence, a lie, and at the kindest, libel. Okay, 1 hour 7 minutes and 20 seconds. I didn't get very far at all, and holy shucks, now they're saying that, okay, so let's calm this down a little bit. The postulate that was put forward was that it's irrational to believe that self-interest will generate something good in your life, and that one is the type that really begs the question. It's a logical fallacy, because, for example, it begs the question: are you going to tell me that you taking interest in my life is going to do better than me having self-interest in my life? I mean, obviously that's just completely ridiculous, because even if I, as a thoughtful and generous person, wanting to take care of, we'll just say my parents, so I have a hardwired in love for them. Me taking care of my parents cannot do the perfect job because I can't get in their head, and no matter how good that we communicate, I can never perfectly meet their needs. And also it's just completely ridiculous anyway too, that to ask one person to live completely for another. It doesn't make sense in so many different ways. There's arguments that could be said that, do unto others is, and so on. So there's arguments to be said that we should all try to take other people's feelings into account, and I'm not arguing against that. But to say that another person could take better care of my interests than I can take care of my interests is ridiculous in the extreme. The best person, and ultimately the person that is responsible for your own self-interests, is you. And that bears repeating, because no one else can get within the 6 inches between your temples, and that is where your self-interests live. And to say that anyone else is responsible for your self-interest and for your body is at its very basic, everybody knows that to be false, because it starts as early on as you can imagine. As soon as you know how to feed yourself, you don't go around expecting other people to act in your self-interest and shovel that food in your mouth. And with the product that comes out the other end, it's the same way. And I would never ask someone else to clean up my own shit. And so why would we expect other people to not only clean up our own shit, but that they're going to be better at it than us? It's patently ridiculous. And this is where, they've got all these people talking about stuff that one and one don't quite make two, and slowly this little variation is additively gonna make another whole number, and it will be interesting to see what exactly that whole number is. Because really, once you start taking all these as a given, you could say, one and one don't make two, they just make a little bit of a remainder, and then before you know it, one and one makes three. Or actually, because you're taking all this as a given, it could be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It doesn't even matter what the conclusion is, because all the steps that we've got to up to this point, we're completely just pulling them out of our ass. Okay, 1 hour and 40 minutes in, and so, as is become the habit of this video so far, they just jump right ahead, skipping an entire part of the logical part. I really expected it, but whatever. Okay, so now they're talking about concrete things. They're talking about, so what we're going to do is we're going to assign a computer to figure out optimal solutions, and I guess magically everyone's just all going to agree that the computer's solution to the problem is all the best, and that we're all going to get along in peaceful, happy, la 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 flowerland. Okay, that's actually kind of easier to swallow than the other thing that they're talking about, which is that what we will do is that the computer is going to result in radical changes in the way that people think, and namely that we're going to stop transporting goods so much, and that we're going to have localized production, and so on and so forth. Now, you know what? Localized production, that's great. If you don't have artificial constraints that are giving benefits to doing wasteful things like favored nation status with China, and so on and so forth, or NAFTA that is making it cheaper for European countries to assemble their cars in Mexico and ship them into the United States rather than assemble them here in the United States, or have a United States manufacturing entire branch, or I could go on. essentially, without those structures, of course, localized production is going to spring up all over the place because the cost of moving things around in many cases is just too high. There are many cases where transporting goods is the better way to go, especially if it's something that has a high degree of technological sophistication and is also small in size and weight. Say electronics. It makes sense. You could have one place in the entire world and ship microprocessors everywhere in the world. That makes sense because the cost of tooling in the factory and everything is going to be so high that it just won't make sense to set up tons of little clean rooms and silicon factories all over the world, and these things weigh nothing, so let's just ship them. So some things really do need to be shipped, and the posited theory in in it is that no, what we'll do is we'll localize everything, and we're not going to even allow for the idea that sometimes it is more efficient to ship things. So I'll chalk that up to an oversimplification of the argument, and we'll just give it as a given that they kind of skipped over that. But the other parts of the argument don't jive either. So it just goes from ridiculousness to ridiculousness, and it gets worse and worse the more I listen to it. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to listen to the end. We will see. 1 hour 49 minutes. He says a resource-based economy is nothing more than a set of proven and whoa, hold the phone. Stop. You didn't prove anything. You've got to prove if you're going to say it's proven. What you did was you threw out a lot of random quotes and a lot of things that were there was a lot of facts in there, and then there was a lot of suppositions that are that they jive with the rational person, and then there was some things that on the surface they sounded right, but really when you look at them analytically they were just plain wrong. And then you put out blatant lies that are verified as lies anytime you look at any text that would relate on that matter. So you put out all these things and you're calling it proof. You didn't show any proof. So what in the hell was the last 1 hour and 50 minutes about? I'll tell you what it was about. It was about propaganda. This is more about emotion rather than logic. And hey, let's face it, a movement of reform, it's going to be most effective if it does play on emotion. But there is plenty of stuff out there that you could use as to evoke an emotional response, yet still remaining strictly on the truth. And the fact of the matter is, I do not trust anything that is going to begin its suppositions with lies, deception. No. No, and can't say it enough, no. 2 hours and 3 minutes, okay. And this is, he says, and this is why in a resource-based economy there is no money, because they have automation. So you have a robot and that means automatically you don't need money. You get a you get an Asimo in your home to do your dishes and that means you don't need money? It doesn't even make any sense. The two do not immediately follow each other. You could have automation with money. Obviously, we already have that right now. You could have no money without automation. That's a feasible thing. In fact, it's been tried before, so we know that it could occur. So the two do not immediately lead into each other. Because you have great, huge automation, it doesn't mean that you have no money. And this is especially true if what they're positing comes to be. Let's see that tomorrow we do that, and 75% of all the people out there are put out of work from automation. Is a huge thing, and all of a sudden production skyrockets because everything's running automatically, and so on and so forth. So now there's a super abundance of goods, and essentially what happens is that the value of these common goods that are able to be automatically produced falls so dramatically because there's such an overabundance that essentially they become free, and everybody just is, you go to the store and you just pick stuff up for free and you walk home with it. And you know what? That sounds great. And who knows? Supposing that there was such a huge abundance, it's possible that such a thing could happen. Provided there was some kind of an incentive, whether altruistic or social, or as they're proposing, I think, fallaciously, but we'll get to that later. Fallaciously proposing that it would be done by central planning, and so the government would do it. Okay, well, whatever the causes are, the idea that there's such a huge abundance of goods that the price falls to pretty much nothing. Now, I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to let this video finish up before I make any conclusions here. I already have a very strong leaning in one direction because I think I see where they're going with this. But hey, let's see, okay? Okay, I mean, and yet again, they bring up a point that I actually agree with. Now, nevertheless, where this point lives is in a fairy tale, but I mean, hey, let's face it. That's to say that we all live in this Star Trekian world where there's always abundance and there is no need for anyone to work. Human altruism, of course, you're going to have tons of people volunteering to run the society for notoriety. Hey, my dad, there's a primary systems collator for this. That's an important job, and there is notoriety and things of this nature that are they're not directly monetizable, but they would still exist in a non-money society. So we know this because they exist right now. This isn't going to go away. But let's face it, despite this, these people, what they're doing is they are serving themselves first. They are not serving their fellow man first. They're serving themselves first. Now, this is easily demonstrable by the fact that they get their reward before the other person gets their reward. They get their reward first, and it's showable because it can be shown that they get their reward first because they are in a state of being, and other people must wait before they can have. Bear with me here. So by being the person that coordinates or causes all of this to happen, okay, they have it first. They have that reward first in terms of recognizance or whatever from other people. It's a state of being. They get that first. The other people have to wait for the distribution or anything else before they can get the good that gets the reward from it. So they're definitely serving themselves first, and they're not counting on their fellow man to look out for their own self-interest. They're in fact going out there and taking care of themselves first. So this just goes back to the earlier premise of what they're saying, is that that human self-interest is irrational, and obviously even in a system like this, which is just a fantasy, this idea that people are going to volunteer demonstrates the very thing that they were trying to say didn't work in the first place. So you can't have it both ways. Either people are initially, good and will volunteer their free time, and they do this out of self-interest, as we all know. I could show it again in a different way. It doesn't mean that these people are not good or providing a good to the society. It simply means that, like the rest of us, they like to feel good. They like to do things that make themselves feel good, and since it happens to us first, that's how it works. It is the extremely rare person that would, provided you're both starving and they're going to give you the last crumb of bread and starve themselves. That is an extremely rare person that does that in practice. And we are socially conditioned that those persons have acted in a morally valuable way. So what they're literally doing is they're acting selfishly by trading the uh, the survival and their own survival for the appreciation and recognizance of the other person. And this goes directly back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that the appreciation there, it can be conditioned to be incredibly powerful, even above other things, and this is why familial relationships are so strong that people will sacrifice their time, effort, energy, and all of these other things to ensure propagation. And okay, so without going too much on a tangent there, the premise before that self-interest is the root of the problem, and then to say that self-interest is going to lead to folks acting altruistically. Well, you can't have it both ways. Either self-interest is non-altruistic and bad, or self-interest is leads to people acting generously and good. You can't have it both ways, and they are trying to argue it both ways, and that just doesn't work. Unless you haven't been paying attention and you don't understand these concepts, in which case, whoosh, right over your head. Okay, here's a concept that is interesting to think about. This idea of cultural victimization. That we're all victimized by our cultures to one degree or another. And they use the term victimization and influence somehow interchangeably. That we're influenced by our culture, and thus we don't really have freedom of choice because we're all influenced by external factors. So, well, let's analyze this, because it may very well be, and I don't know that anyone could really prove one way or the other. If we are all just a processing center that takes the input and regurgitates an output completely according to the inputs, and this has been argued highly successfully many different ways. There's been talks at TED and books written about this, and there's just all sorts of things to show that this may be the case. Okay, let's just say that none of us are anything more than the aggregate sum of all of our previous experiences, and we're nothing else. That we can never bring up anything original to the equation. Well, it kind of begs the question, for one thing, that an idea that societies as a whole evolve in kind of a organic way, and that one thing leads directly into another thing, just as a matter of course. Just because people playing off of each other and the interaction between people, it just naturally leads to this certain conclusion as like a natural law. And that's kind of compelling in a way, because for one thing, if you have any observation of human behavior, you see certain trends, both worldwide and localized, in terms of how they like to self-govern, what they choose, what kind of values tend to correlate with certain types of government or social groups, and many other factors, like how consumer spending is allocated in correlation with other kinds of values. And okay, so it would seem that on the surface would seem to relate to what we've been talking about the organic evolution of a culture, if you will. Now, in order for this to be so, then what we would be thinking here is that, by and large, on an average basis, in a large group of people, large groups of people are going to react in the same way overall, as assuming they have the equal input, just like neurons in the brain, so to speak. You wire them up in a certain way, and you're going to get a certain answer. Or electronics, logic gates, the same type of thing. So if you have people that are treated this way in their childhood and they're exposed to this kind of thing when they're growing up, so you're going to get these cookie cutter kind of people coming out, and their ideas are going to be limited according to the experiences that they've had, and voila. So this immediately follows that if you were to take a bunch of children from any people in the most advanced society today, put them into a creche, and raise them according to as close of an approximation of, we'll just say, Renaissance values that you can get, you're going to end up with a bunch of Renaissance babies. And their little microculture is going to be, they'll think like Renaissance people, and so on and so forth. And this will be as close of an approximation as you can get because these were the inputs that we knew and recorded at the time. Likewise, if you had a golden era of people at any given time, the more information you had, you could create people that lived from that golden era of time that are hardworking or motivated or extra creative or anything else that you wanted. And this would be true only so far as you kept them isolated from the other blocks of society, because it's self-evident under this operating theory that immediately as soon as this creche or this individual group that was isolated for these conditions became in contact with the rest of the world, the situation changes. And now it's more of like what happens to the caveman in the 20th century situation rather than anything else. And okay, so let's face it, to a certain extent this may be true because we all know that people that have violent, unfortunate childhoods or other childhood influences are influenced by it, both on a physical level and on a mental level. So we are all influenced by our environment, and I think no one would dispute that we're all influenced by our environment. However, to say that individual choice doesn't enter into it, that we're not responsible for our individual actions, I think that's a bit of a stretch. For example, I think that in order to show that individual choice, that we're not there's an individual choice because we are just sums of our environment. Well, let's face it, on a broad cookie cutter kind of way you could maybe argue that, but on an individual way I don't think that that's possible, because what about someone who childhood whatever and then goes and completely isolates themselves? So their thoughts obviously are going to be a winding, according to this model, their thoughts are going to be a winding of regurgitated derivatives of all their prior experiences. But since they are slowly losing all the inputs, and those, we all know that these things are going to wind down because these memories are going to be farther in the past. People live in the present, and if you stop having the input, after a while it just goes away. Like any addiction or anything else, you stop using a computer and you'll find all sorts of other things open up in your life, and just like you change a habit in any other way, your body reacts to the change. So if you got rid of all the other people, now you can say, well, now they're not influencing you anymore, so are your thoughts and your actions are either your own or they are not your own. Now, if you say that they're still not your own and that you're simply reacting to the environment, then you know what? Man is simply nothing more than an amoeba, and nothing that we do even matters. So what is the point of arguing moralism or the best thing of way of organizing society? All of that doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned, because we're all going to live, we're all going to suffer, and we're all going to die. And it's a very bleak kind of a bleakest reading of Buddhism that you could possibly imagine, so to speak. Now, if you take the other way, that the person that's been living in isolation long enough actually is making their own decisions and reacting according to reason or whatever they've been programmed. But their brain has a certain amount of genetic programming for reason, and so that they can come to conclusions in and of themselves as so long as their brain can allow it. If you suppose that, then it is not very far at all to argue that if they can do it on their own, then they can do it in a group of people with a lot more clogging of inputs, so to speak, like advertising and radio and this podcast and everything else, because obviously the environment is a contributing factor, but it is not the sole factor, and everyone still, at the end of the day, still has the decision on what they want to do, whether or not they're available of all options or not. So to say that a mass murderer is not responsible for his actions because his environment made him that way and he wasn't available and other things, well, we're all mass murderers, folks. We just have chosen a different course. We all have that same wiring. There's nothing that differentiates us and a Jeff Dahmer or you name them from a biological sense. Their experiences, our experiences, we all experience the exact same world. They reacted in a different way than us. Whether it was, you can call it a mutation, you can call it a genetic predisposition, you can call it child abuse, but in the case of Dahmer, he claims he had a great childhood, no child abuse whatsoever. I mean, obviously there was a certain amount of repression due to some homosexuality there, but I mean, let's stick to the point here. What we're talking about is, at the end of the day, where in society did it influence Dahmer to chop people up and dissolve them in acid? That specific idea of applying those sciences to a human body, it came from him. That decision tree, it couldn't have come from society because that was incredibly specific. And since society's influences didn't give him that specificity, you can't say that it came from, that he's a victim of society in that regard. And that's just one level of the atrocities that he committed. And if you in for a dime, in for all of it. So you can't just take a few steps of that and say that all the others don't apply. If a person can have choice when they're alone, then that person has choice when they're around people or any other influences. The influences at that point don't matter whether the choice is real or imaginary or illusionary. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, the human being themselves makes the decision on how they're going to interpret and see the world. And you can never take that away from them, short of something like a lobotomy. Just like with advertising. Sure, advertising influences people, but as has been proven, it cannot influence people that don't want to be influenced. If you listen to an advertisement from a purely skeptical and analytical way, it doesn't enter into your subconscious and make you think of buying a Lexus every time you make love to your wife. That's not how it works. I mean, they've proven this so long ago. Well, at least as close to proving it as any mental science you can get. But they've shown that you can't get that kind of level of commitment out of a advertising or from influences. Hypnotism, you can't just hypnotize someone into doing something that goes against their intrinsic moral programming that has spent years going into them. You have to at least reprogram, if you will, equal time and equal effort into them in order to change their point of view. And the same thing with persuasion. Anyone who has ever been in sales knows that persuasion is a iterative process. You have to give them a lot of different things, and intrinsically they have to both A, want to be sold, and B, want what you're giving. If either one of those are not present, the best salesman in a world, you're not going to buy the ShamWow cloth or whatever else they're selling. You're not just going to hypnotize and do it. Oh, he has a loud voice and he talks very quickly, so I'm going to do what he says. That is not how it works. At the end of the day, you still have that decision, and to try to say that it is that choice and that power has been taken away from you is, I think, probably the most dangerous thing that has been put forth in this Zeitgeist 3, and it is so dangerous that people that accept it at face value without an argument, without a deep sense of repugnancy, I have a sincere worry for, because they just don't get it. And when something happens, if they really believe that, they're going to be the person that's going to say, oh, I've been victimized. I have been wronged by this other party. And, I want to bail out, I think that, I deserve these things. I'm entitled to government benefits, because the jobs have gone overseas, so I'm entitled to the healthcare system. Healthcare system is an intrinsic right. I shouldn't have to take responsibility for my own health. Heaven forbid. We all know that we all know that Joe across the street's going to take better care of my interests than me, so I don't want to have to deal with it. We'll just let the robots do it. The robots are going to take care of my self-interest better than me. This is where this argument takes us. If you aren't responsible for this was at the very beginning of the video about being responsible for your own actions, and now it's come full circle, and they keep coming back to this. It keeps coming back to, are you responsible for your own actions? And if you are, you can live a free and happy life, because the man isn't going to control your life. He cannot get in your head no matter what, because you've made that decision. But the easy way, quote unquote easy, I mean, in actuality I would think it would be quite a lot harder for many reasons, but people will call it the easy way, would be to let the government take care of it, or the central planning authority, or the computer, or the robots, whatever that they're talking about here, a social planning system to take care of you, rather than you having to worry about these things. There's definitely less thought involved there. There's less, if you don't have to worry about where the bread comes on the table, which most people don't anyway, they just trade money, which, hey, that's fine, that's a society thing, but if you don't have to worry about working for it, if you don't have to worry about in any way how it's produced or how it comes to be because the robots do it, then gosh, I really, really do hope that you don't buy into the idea that someone else is taking care of your self-interest, because if you do and your food's coming for free, you are going to sit on your ass. And that's the danger of this philosophy, is if they actually succeeded, and brought about this moneyless society where robots build endless amounts of prosperity and overproduction, such that everyone can just go and take whatever they want, we're going to end up with a whole class of people who believe in these entitlements, and as a result they are going to be huge, fat slobs who don't take care of themselves and provide a huge burden on everyone else, namely the ever shrinking, I might add, productive class. And that sounds almost like an exact replica of the nightmare scenario in Atlas Shrugged, just to bring that up. And I wouldn't be surprised in such a scenario where the productive class just says, well, we're going to go form our own little society or city or whatever you want to call it, and actually do some good in the world and let the masses, they'll live for a while and slowly they'll starve. And this is the problem again with this system. It assumes that the robots are going to create endless prosperity. Now, on the surface, that sounds great. Like a Star Trek world, we've solved all the energy problems, and we nobody's hungry, nobody's unclothed, everyone has the basics of life. Okay, well, we'll just ignore for the moment, maybe forever. We'll just ignore for right now the idea of who defines what a necessity of life is, right? Because maybe you define them. We'll just leave that alone. Okay. Now, if you have a system whereby there is a production, that system does have a finite maximum. Whatever it may be, it is finite. Now, you can always expand the system. You can always there's plenty of things you can do with resources, but ultimately there's only so much mass on the Earth. So the mass of the Earth is finite. The available immediate resources are finite, and the amount of resources that can be consumed into any good that we're talking about, we'll just say food, shelter, and whatever, like they did in the video, those resources are determined as a function of the producers, in this case the robots, and the resources, the robots and time. So and that's fixed. Now, population's going to grow. If the past is any prediction, in a war, if there's no war, which, hey, there's not going to be a war in that society, obviously. And I'm not saying that facetiously. There wouldn't be in the society that they're talking about. There wouldn't be any need. You could just go and get whatever you want, and hey, that sounds good on the surface. So population would naturally tend to grow, and the population that's growing is going to mean you need more robots to produce more food. And okay, essentially, whether it's sooner or later or whatever, you're going to run into an issue of sustainability. And this is something, okay, maybe it's 100, 300, 500 years down the road, but at some point that does come into it. And when it does, the unfortunate circumstance is that system does not have a way to cope with scarceness. And if they do, they certainly don't talk about it. Because the idea that their utopia, there could be a scarcity, or that there is something removed from our current culture, would be a much stronger motivator than the good things that they're talking about. The fear of loss is much stronger than the fear of gain, or the temptation of gain. So let's talk about how would they deal with a scarcity of resources. What if you have reached that limit where there's no longer available space, or there's the technology is to the point where you have 100 people and you can only get food for 99 of them? Someone has to make that decision on how we're going to divide the resources. Do 99 get full food and the one person doesn't get any food, or do you subdivide and everyone goes slightly with a scarcity? Okay, well, if that's the case, and then there's another baby born, and then it subdivides even more, and you have a really terrible slow starvation type of situation until what happens is the population tends to balance out because there's just not enough energy to bring more people into the world. Let's not hit that one too hard, but that's a very real possibility in this kind of a scarcity situation. Alright, what about another idea? We'll just leave that one alone as a possibility rather than hit on it too hard, because there is some holes that you could poke in it. Another much more likely and dangerous scenario in this is wherein resources could be allocated in multiple ways. And if resources are you have to make a decision on whether to make the wheat into bread or to make the wheat into cereal. Now, this is a simple question on the surface, of course. In an abundance situation, it doesn't even matter. You got huge stockpile of wheat. You just you go and you take as much as you need for both according to the demands of the people, and voila, it's done. Now, in an actual economy, that is not exactly how it works. In an actual economy, you have a finite amount of wheat, and that's how it is in real life. So this system would have to decide how much of the wheat are we going to put toward a cereal that everyone enjoys and loves, and how much are we going to put into bread. We can't put them into both. And as it so happens, in order to satisfy both, we would need 100 bushels of wheat, and we only have 90 bushels of wheat. And the demand is such that so the demand is more than the thing, and we have to make a decision between these two products. Either way, it's all going to be used up. There's no waste, but we have to make that decision. Now, there's no possible way that such a decision can be made on an external basis, and it can't be dynamically adjusted for because the people have an abundance mentality. When you go to the store, you just take whatever you want according to your own preferences. If you take whatever you want according to your own preferences, then it would make sense from the way they're saying it that you will make whatever's the most popular for the other person. Well, let's say that the wheat is converted with cereal slightly less efficiency than bread, and that's the reality in real life. You can get you can get a lot more nutritional value out of the bread than you can out of the cereal, but maybe the cereal is more popular. So now you have a real economy quandary that their magical computer in the sky has to make the decision on which way do we slice it here. So the obvious solution is, hey, we have to make sure that the base needs are met, so guess what? There's not enough cereal to go around. So you're in line, you go to the store, darn, there's not enough cereal. There's no cereal today. Can I get a rain check so I can be next in line? Now there's all sides of, now there's rationing, there's these other considerations that before wasn't the case. And history has shown in these situations what happens is you end up with an elitist class. This brings about classism. These are the exact same arguments, by the way, that they talk about the free market, quote unquote free market. Well, the actuality is classism comes about when you put a restriction on it. I'll show you how. Because when there's this scarcity, and it's just based on random, whenever the truck arrives, well, someone's going to have inside knowledge. Someone knows when that truck arrives with the cereal, and so they get to have first dibs at it. So that person, just by definition right there, by having that knowledge, is a privileged class when it comes to getting their cereal, which is a limited good. And from here it's very easy to see how such privileged information can develop into a privileged class, and in other things too. Information is traded, so the guy that knows when the cereal comes in, he gets with the guy that there's a scarcity in another area, so he trades his information with the other guy, so now they both benefit. They get to before the general populace. And it's very quickly, this is just human nature, because why wouldn't you benefit yourself? To suppose that we're going to train these people to not act in their own self-interest is ridiculous, because the rumbles of their belly and their own dispositions are going to train them harder than any creche or human conditioning or anything else in this utopian society. We have billions of years of evolution built into our belly. Belly knows what it wants. Belly's gonna, strongly motivate us to these other behaviors that are going to lead us toward having preferential acquisition of these goods in a scarcity economy. So you see how very quickly this entire thing falls apart. And these aren't even these aren't even arguments against the zeitgeist stuff. These aren't even arguments against that. These are simply arguments about how to manage a scarceness in an economic system under communism. Because let's face it, zeitgeist people, you are communists. A lot of these people that subscribe to it, they're unsophisticated in all of, let's face it, there's volumes of literature, and they're unsophisticated in just exactly what it is, but let's call it what it is. It is communism. It is pure communism. You might even call it like a communalism, but when you have to put it to the test of a scarcity in a substance, because you cannot assume that there is always going to be an abundance of goods. To assume that there's always going to be an abundance of goods is ridiculous. And here's a very easy way to show that. And if you always have an abundance, then your population should always be able to grow, right? Well, we've shown that eventually there will be an equilibrium point, whether Earth has 100 billion people in our colonies across the globe, or whatever. Whatever. It is, there will be an equilibrium at some point, and then you'll be faced with these problems. So the only way to avoid that would be to avoid an abundance in some other thing, namely offspring. And like in China, where you're limited to one child per family, that's what people are advocating if you're going to solve that problem the other way. After all, it follows, if you're going to say, hey, I believe in the central planning, I believe it can manage resources most effectively. Well, you know what? What do we call? When you go to get a job, who do you talk to in a company? Human resources. Humans are a resource just like anything else. And to say that in a planned economy, eventually, maybe not at the beginning, but to say that we're not going to be managed just like any other resource, whether it's by a computer or a committee or anything else, is naive. I think it's naive, because it would just make sense. If I had the purest intentions in making the system work, and if I was writing it, I really would. I would try to make it work, because I think that a lot of people could be happy under it, assuming ideal circumstances. So I really would try to make it work if it was going on. But even assuming the best intentions, and I'm working the best, I'm programming the computer the best that I know how, there's going to be some very hard decisions. And one of the decisions that I might make, if I had the best intentions, would be that, hey, I'm gonna manage these human resources that we have, and in order to get the best sustainability, which is such a definable term, but so we're going to define sustainability this year in this 5-year plan as everybody gets exactly 1.24 kids. And oh gosh, you see where this leads is just someone's got to translate these computerized edicts into something that's applicable to humans. Humans don't divide that way, but that's how the math would. Sustainability would come down like that. So some families get to have 2 kids, some families get to have 1 kid. What if by chance in a local population you end up with more males than females, or vice versa? Now you have forced relocation of some kind in order to make sure that it works, or there's another alternate breakdown in terms of marital structures or other. We can interpret what could happen a million times, because it's a fantasy world that we're talking about. And it's fun to do these little thought experiments, because often it can analyze into what is going on. So this got a little bit tangential. We kind of went on a fun little roller coaster ride there, but if you at the end of this, if you don't understand, or if you just plain disagree, maybe you just closing your ears, whatever. Everyone is going to make their own decisions about what to do with the information. And this, if you listen to it all, was certainly a lot more boring than the propaganda that they were putting in the other video. All three of the videos, I've seen them all. They are full of propaganda, and for an organization that claims, well, I won't say what they claim because I don't want to speak for them, but for an organization that recognizes the power and that they definitely seem to dislike the abuses, what they call the abuses of advertising, they definitely lay it on thick with a trowel in their videos. It is just really incredible to me just how shameless they are in using it. It's like they're going to tell you in one breath that you're being sold to and you're being influenced, and then in the exact same breath, the next sentence, they're going to try to influence you using the exact same methodology. It's like, either so the source of the propaganda, the source of this advertising, is the only thing that's bad, and everything that I am selling you on, everything I am advertising and trying to overtly influence your emotions on, is good, and it's okay, you can trust me. It's, you see how these are equally ridiculous. It's the Lexus advertisement, boobs and ass and a car. It's so overt, so silly. Or diamonds are forever. You buy a diamond earring and you pretty much get a blowjob. That and Zeitgeist to me are just equally retarded in the IQ level that they assume from the person that watches it. And the incredible thing to me that really floors me is, just like religion, you are seeing a lot of very smart people nodding their heads and saying, oh yeah, I'm highly educated, I agree with this, this is the way to do it, let's gung-ho, let's band together, let's get this done. And really what they're buying into is the hatred of the current system. And that's all that they're hearing, I think. I think they're hearing the downfalls of the current system and the excesses of government, and they're so busy nodding their heads on how those are wrong that they don't even hear that the solution is like amputating your leg for a toenail that you need trimmed. Not only is there no guarantee that it would be any better, not that you need a guarantee, but not is there not any reasonable assumption that it's going to be any better, but there is almost for certain an assurance that it would be worse. So I just want to close this up with one final argument that seems to be implied in the video, and so we'll just roll with it. The idea that the system will, what's going to happen is you'll never run out of the abundance, because what you will have is a continued source of innovation, and you're going to just continue to get better and better. And all these people with their free time, what they're going to do is spend it finding a better mousetrap and improvements for the robots, and so that, and since their ideas are shared communally, everyone benefits from it just completely freely, and so the information is just shared on the net, and hey, on the surface that sounds like an actually a great idea, because like I said, it's a very compelling idea that if you find something that's good for humanity from a completely altruistic perspective, release it into the public sector, put it out there, put it like Linux and the free software. When one person finds an innovation in one branch of Linux, it gets applied often very organically across the board uh, into the other implementations and distributions. And I like that concept of giving things away for free. If it's something that's a real innovation, it'll get used, and it'll be decided through consensus. If it's good, it'll get used. If the other smart people think it's not a good thing and they found a better way, then whatever. And no one person's idea has weight over the other people. Okay, now these are the concepts. What would happen in practice, and how would that be any better than something that we have right now? Right now, every time you have a technological innovation, it enriches everybody. Everyone gets enriched. And just not a really a proof, but a demonstration of this that would be easy for everyone to nod your heads in. You could actually run the numbers yourself later if you're an economist, or at least you could get the basics in a closed economic system. Would be, we'll say, let's think of something like post-war innovations. We'll say refrigeration, or no, we'll say washing machine. The washing machine made the inventor and the people that manufactured them incredibly rich, but it enriched the entire society even more. And this is easy to show because of all the time saving that it did. If the inventor of the automated washing machine, I'm talking about like the pre-1950s style one, if the inventor of going from the hand washing boards and putting it on the line, then you got a washer and a dryer, and it's so much quicker and it frees up so much time for other pursuits, whatever they may be. But ultimately it's freedom, right? So you can do whatever you want. Freeing all this time up enriched the humanity. So they plopped down a load of money, but their net gain in time and money, whichever way you monetized it, was far greater than any cost that they could have put out for the device itself. So humanity had a net increase in riches and gave the entire economy, everyone that bought one, a net boost forward in along the economic path towards sustainability, if you will, or growth, or whichever way you want to quantify it. Same thing would happen in the proposed economy by the Zeitgeists. If you had a economic innovation like the washing machine that affects everyone and makes everyone's life a little bit more efficient or easy and frees up time that can be applied in another way, maybe enlightenment or education or something else, that would propel us more. It would feed more into whatever system that is going on, whichever way it is. If it's applied to the population, then everyone would benefit from it. And we saw this in every form of government, whether it was a monarchy, when there was an improvement in whatever system, such as sanitation, everyone tended to benefit from it across the board, and the primary beneficiary of that was that that monarchical system tended to last longer, or had more strength, or had a greater tax base, or in whatever sense that system improved. And the same thing happened when the United States shipped technology over to Russia, and or when Russia stole the technology from the United States for the atom bomb. The Russians had an incredible technological improvement, and it fed their broken and obviously malformed economy, which later collapsed because we stopped giving them machines and tractors and all of these things that we were giving them during the 30s. When those stopped in the 80s, they finally that economy collapsed under its own weight, because they didn't have technological innovation. And so it wouldn't matter what the economy was. If you have technological innovation, it's going to keep that economy alive longer, because everyone's getting a little bit more richer. It gives you a bit more momentum to get down the road. It's like a car that's sputtering, and it finds a little bit more ounces of gas. So it begs the question that is pretty much impossible to prove. The question is, which system would have both A, greater technological improvement rate, and B, distribution of that system into the greater masses of people? Obviously, if you have the best washing machine in the world and only the elitists get to use it, like in Russia, it's not going to help, and it doesn't keep your people rolling down the road. Right now, we know that the freer the economy is, the less restrictions, the more widely distribution tends to go. We're talking in general principles here. So we know that a truly free market is pretty good at that. We also know that planned economies tend to be pretty darn bad at that, from the simple perspective that they don't know how to get the goods to the first and the right people first. In a free market system that gets to the first persons first according to their own choices, the people that buy the goods first just so happen to usually be the people that are trendsetters in the whole economy. So if something is something that's of value, trendsetters usually buy it, then it spreads on outwards from there. Don't even really need advertising in a truly free economy. The value of a product is inherent in it. So it would seem to imply that a free market would be better than the Zeitgeist style market, because they'd have no way of quantifying which one was better or which one was, well, even beyond that, you wouldn't really have a way of distributing the better one for the worse one or anything else, because you wouldn't know which ones to go first. And to say they would instantaneously adapt all the different technological marvels and innovations and all of that all comes out in the wash, because we already know that no matter what the innovation is, it's going to help whatever economy it's with. So why would that one be any better than the one we have? Or even better, why would that one be better than a truly free economy, which we know would work without all the overhead or the computer or anything else of that nature? The two things that they would share, a truly free economy and the Zeitgeist style, would be the approach toward childcare and education and so forth. But unlike in the Zeitgeist, where everyone in that planned economy, where everyone is, to me, it seems like they're kind of force-fed this state-driven propaganda. Hey, this is the best way, and you're gonna listen, and this is how it's gonna be, because this is we've decided, the computers decided that this is the best way to do it. So you don't even have to think of a better way. It seems to me like you're just training people not to innovate. And I can't imagine that people would be inventing lots of new things in a society that says that the computer is going to decide the best way to manage resources. The rare person that said, hey, I can think of a better way than the computer can. Oh, man alive. The society on a whole is going to shut that person down so much they are going to crucify him. Oh, no, we're all been taught in school that it's better. It's just better. The computer has way more information. No one person can really comprehend the economic system. So, if you think that you found a better way to do things, you're just obviously mistaken, or you don't understand the whole system. And actually heard these same kind of arguments every now and again from free market people. So that's what I'm going to end it on, is this idea that the Zeitgeist is something new. It is not new. The idea that this system is sustainable, well, that's highly disputable. I think it's just a form of communist group thinking, managed things that's so dangerous. And if you're buying into it, and if you're young, you really ought to have your head examined. And also, if you're buying into it and you're young and you really believe what the Zeitgeists are saying, you should have your head examined, because you're just a product of your environment. So if you're believing what they have to say, obviously they're wrong. because you went to a state school and the state has been trying to train you to support them. The state's evil, obviously, because otherwise you wouldn't be going for these guys. Well, if you're believing these guys are wrong too. If you find me offensive, you should probably listen to me. So, with that, good night.